Hey there, I'm so excited today to bring you behind the scenes of the making of Mystical Stitches, give you a little more of an idea of what went into the book and how it came to be. Because it was not a linear process at all. I wasn't like, I'm going to write a book called Mystical Stitches and it's going to have all this in it. It was this constant evolution and this constant moving towards like, oh, I have this idea to do this little thing. Let me see what happens if I act on that idea. Let me see what happens if I give that inspiration, that concept that's sort of brewing in my mind. What if I give that a little more time? What if I allow that to be part of my creative process? So I just want to share that with you because I think that we can see what people have created and we don't necessarily see all the tiny little steps that happen behind it. And when we imagine ourselves creating something like that, it can seem too big almost. And I just want to share all of the little steps that came up to it so that when you find yourself maybe in front of a little step, but thinking, oh no, I should be making more time for the big step, maybe the little step is the big step, or at least a tiny part of it. We're actually going to start this video with some of my favorite sort of unexpected things that happened through the process. So I am not sure whose idea it was to put the reverse of the actual embroidery of the cover on the back of the cover, but I'm obsessed with how this turned out. And what I didn't realize is how many people would be really moved by this and how many people would feel released from their need to perfect everything by just seeing this page. And if I had known that we were going to, I think my art director did it, Alethea. She's incredible. She always has amazing ideas. And I think that if I had known that this was going to be, I maybe would have trimmed some of these extra threads, maybe these white ones over here. But I'm so glad that I didn't because so many people have looked at the inside cover and gone, oh my God, I thought the backside of my embroideries were supposed to be as perfect as the front. That's what my grandma told me. And they don't. Nobody cares what the backside of your embroidery looks like. We're not getting graded on these. Literally no one cares. And my second favorite part about the book was that, first of all, I love the table of contents. My publisher held me to my idea when I said, hey, you know, it would be cool if we had Alexander Jacopetti-Hart, the author of Native Funk and Flash, write the foreword. And I think I just inserted that into the book proposal. And then once the book was done, they were like, hey, so did you reach out to Alexander Jacopetti-Hart? And I was like, me? I'm supposed to email? Oh no, that was just like an idea I had. I didn't know that was supposed to happen. So I found her website online and I emailed her, and a couple days later she emailed me back and was like, sure, I'd love to. I also interviewed her on my podcast. So this was like major, like one of the biggest experiences of my life. You can see me here on this page, actually reading that book in this first shot. So that was an incredible experience. Another fun part that I just feel like I want to note is like after finishing these stitches, I am not the most perfect stitcher. I occasionally leave things unfinished. And so there's some pages like this one where I was like, oh no, I didn't finish stitching that. I ran out of thread and never got back there. So the Hydra is slightly imperfect and I love that for us. And the third, I don't know what number I'm on here, but anyways, the illustrations were by Nina Chakrabarti. And if you have not heard of her, she's a really incredible illustrator. And it just so happened that I had purchased a book that she had written on fashion for my niece when my niece was really young. She made this like amazing coloring book on fashion, and I bought that for my niece. And so when my publisher said, hey, what do you think about having Nina Chakrabarti as your illustrator? Again, it's like, like this entire process, there was so much shock and awe involved in my experience. And then lastly is having my friend Brad Ogbona do the photography. Another sort of like really incredible experience, like one of those dream come true moments. I was just actually trying to finish this while we were doing the photo shoot. We were like in between shoots and I was just trying to finish this and he captured that shot. He's just an incredible photographer and a really great guy. We met years ago at like a friend's place up in the Catskills one summer. So it was really wonderful to have him over. It was about 7,000 degrees that day and he was just the most incredible photographer to have with me. And yeah, so let's get into how this book got made. How did Mystical Stitches come to be? Because I didn't say one day, I want to write a book called Mystical Stitches and it's going to be all about embroidery for personal empowerment and magical embellishment. So for this video today, I wore one of the tops that was featured in the front of the book because I feel like this top is also a really good example of that, of like just letting, this is on the front cover page, of just letting an idea go and just being like, yeah, sure, let's see what happens if we do that. So the night before the Mystical Stitches photo shoot. I'm trying to slow down. People say I talk too fast in the videos. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm excited. Anyways, so the night before the Mystical Stitches photo shoot, is that better? Is that working better for you? Does that sound a little more natural? I was going through all of the clothes that I had put together for the photo shoot. We had like looks that I had put together. And I was like, there are a lot of jacket backs. And I know that the art director is going to want more author fronts. So I was like, well, this jacket actually didn't fit me that well. It kind of like wasn't that flattering. So I was like, well, let's just turn it into a shirt. I don't know, just turn it around. So I started off by cutting the sleeves off because I knew that the set-in sleeves of a blazer would not flip very easily. So I said, cut the sleeves off and then just figure it out from there. Because the embroidery was so high up on the back of the jacket, I ended up having to do this little number where I like slit down the middle. And I ended up loving this neckline. Never would have arrived there naturally, never would have sketched that out. But because of the process of like, let me just cut the sleeves off, put the jacket on backwards and see what happens. So yeah, that's kind of the lesson in like everything I do, but also especially in the making of this book. So if you don't know, Mystical Stitches is a book all about embroidery for personal empowerment and magical embellishment. It was published on the summer solstice in June 2021. So a little bit of the backstory of how we got here. We're gonna go way back with like how I started with embroidery. So in about, I think 2011 or so, somewhere around there, I started working with embroidery as a tool for manifestation in the sense that I feel like I was actually creating spells, but what I was doing was I was taking quotes from some of my favorite songs, and it was a lot of love song lyrics, and I was embroidering them and just in fun compositions with flowers, and I was like casting little spells because this is at the beginning of a relationship of mine that was a relatively long term for me. So I feel like it was a little spell that I cast. I just didn't know it yet. And at the time, my boss, who I was working with, saw these stitches and saw me working on one, and he was like, "Oh, let's have an art show." So I pulled together an art show with my friend. That's a longer story, but so I started, once I kind of got validated, like not that I need validation for everything, but like, yeah, I'm human. I was just doing my little thing. I'm always doing little tinkering with little things, but for someone to see it and say like, hey, that's worthy of your time, felt really encouraging, especially I was probably, I don't know, mid-20s at that point. And so I was not very like comfortable in my own skin. I was not very confident. So it felt really nice to have that sort of reassurance from someone who I really looked up to and admired. And so for the record, it's like when you look at these earlier stitches, they're not that good. I think people oftentimes are like, oh, you're so good at embroidery. I could never be that good. And I'm like, I was not that good. I'm persistent. And I realize that happens a lot for me in my life where I'm like, I think of myself as talented. I'm like, oh, I'm just like talented artist. No, I'm persistent. And I just want to emphasize that how important that is of just being persistent. I realized that like, I didn't even get accepted to the like magnet art school that I went to. I ended up on a wait list. They looked at, it was a juried art school. They looked at my portfolio and they decided that it wasn't good enough and put me on the wait list. And I just got lucky and ended up in the school, which was good because I otherwise would have dropped out of high school. Anyways, we went too far back there. Bring it back in. So I was making those embroideries. I've always worked with textiles, continue to make clothes, continue to work with embroidery here and there. And then I moved up here to the Catskills in 2015, 2016. And then I met Allison from Madame Fortuna, which is a local vintage store. It's incredible. She just moved into a new shop. So I'm just like, I'm so excited for Allison. But yeah, so she met me and was like, I would love for you to do some of those embroideries on some of the vintage that I have. So we started doing that together, and we both share a love for the mystical, a love for sort of esoteric concepts and imagery. And so I was able to really push that in a way, again, of somebody, external validation of someone saying, I would love to see that. I want to work with that more. And being able to be like, oh, okay, let's open up to that a little bit more. And at that time, as sort of a basis for working with the imagery that I was working with and learning a little bit more about how symbolism is used in symbolism is used within artwork, I was reading a lot about Jungian symbolism and then starting to kind of blend that in with magical intention setting. So this sort of like merging of like mental health and magic, although Jungian psychoanalysis is pretty magical. So some of the books that I was reading at the time, and I think I quote a lot of these in the back of Mystical Stitches, but Man and His Symbols was one of them. And this is not like a book about symbols. It's more about how symbols work within our daily lives. I did not read this cover to cover. I kind of jump around. It's very technical. I'm not a very technical person. So I just kind of absorb what I can and just gloss over the stuff that I don't understand. And I think it's an interesting way to read books where you're like, this feels over my head, but I'm still just going to see what I can pull from it. This was another, I had quite a few books of illustrated encyclopedias of symbols, but this was one of my favorites to reference. It just had a lot of different cultural references as well. Like within each excerpt, it'll have like, okay, this is like an excerpt from Mirror, and it has reference, like it says Buddhist references, Chinese references, Christian references, Hindu references, Islamic, Japanese, Mexican, Taoist, Semitic. So it has a lot of different cultures, and it kind of it compares different cultures within very small excerpts. So I think this one was super helpful. And then on the magical end of it, going into Scott Cunningham, I think some of his books are a little bit like not necessarily well sourced, but it was just a really great place to work from. And also different books on tarot. This is a book on the Crowley Tarot and talking about the different symbols within the tarot deck, the Crowley Tarot deck. So those were some of the books that were inspiring how I was talking about the symbols and things that were included. So that's sort of what was in my mind and what I was working with, and I had no intentions of writing a book. But in 2018, Natalie Ross contacted me about being interviewed for one of my favorite podcasts at the time. It was called Dream Freedom Beauty. She then went on to have a podcast called Earth Speak. I don't know what Natalie's doing right now. And I said, yes, obviously I would love to. And then Natalie would do these secret episodes where people who were on her newsletter would get the secret episode. And so she said, do you want to do a secret episode or any sort of free offer or something that people can get? And I was like, oh, it would be really fun to pull together some of these symbols that I've been working with in a little dictionary, like just a little encyclopedia, a tiny little encyclopedia, like my own personal version of this, but like a little 6-page thing. And also provide instructions on different stitches that they could use to actualize it. So that turned into, this is the first sketch for it. It never ended up looking like this, but I made this little sketch for this little zine called Illuminated Threads. And this is the first sort of initial mock-up, and I loved it, but I was like, it needs to look a little bit different. So ritual in there. So this is the first sketch for it, and I love it because there's this note here that says, what if this was collaged? And that ended up being the entire zine ended up being collaged, a little mix of digital collage and my own and like physical collage. And that turned into a book called Illuminated Stitches. It was like a symbolism and correspondence encyclopedia. I went a little bit further. I felt like I had so much more to say. So I took pre-orders for Illuminated Stitches. And as you can see, it's all collaged and magic in stitches. That page that you saw ended up getting a little cosmic makeover. And then also talking about like how I wanted to include botanical correspondences. How can we talk about different elements and numbers and then also providing instruction for stitching. So this zine ended up being something that I sold for pre-orders. And I just loved, I was content with it. I didn't see anything else happening with it. I saw maybe making more like it. But I was like, this feels complete. I feel done. And then in 2019, I met a friend named Stacy. And when I met her, she's a friend of mine, our guys are friends. And she was like, oh, I work on design and layout for craft books. And I was like, and I thought I totally freaked her out because I was so excited when I heard that. I was like, that's the coolest job I've ever heard of. How did you get into that? That's just incredible. Still had no idea that this was going to happen. And she eventually caught wind. We follow each other on Instagram. I didn't scare her apparently. And she found out about my zine and she said, you need to make this into a bigger book. And I was like, I don't actually need to do that. I'm fine. Thank you. And she was like, no, I really think that this could be something bigger. Let me connect you with the publishers. Why don't you just put together a book proposal? And I was like, I don't know what that is. So no, I will not be doing that. And she was like, okay, let me make this easy for you. Why don't you get everything onto your laptop, bring that laptop over to my house, and we will put a book proposal together. So she basically held my hand through the entire process. She sent it to my publisher, Story Publishing, and they loved it. And they were I was worried about working with a publisher because I was like, I want to be in control. Not that I'm a control freak, but when it comes to my own art, yeah, I'm a control freak. Not in my life, but when it comes to my art and what gets put out into the world with my name on it, Anybody should be a control freak about that. And I realized when I was talking to them, I was like, I feel like they are here for my vision. They don't have an idea of what this book should be, although they had plenty of guidance as far as what they know would be successful, which was amazing, but they were not trying to interrupt my vision. And that just felt so special. And so I didn't even shop the book around. I was just like, yeah, I'm going to go with them. That's going to be my publisher. So then after a little bit of negotiation, because we should always negotiate as artists, no one is ever going to give us what we don't ask for. So as for the actual creation of the book, the writing of the book. So this is how I usually approach creating any writing body or creating any sort of completed body. I will grab all of the books that are really just calling out to me. It's not necessarily, let me find the right perfect books. I just go through my bookshelf and said, that one said hi, that one said pick me, that one said pick me. And I pull them all together. I get them on the floor. I get out a pad of Post-it notes and I start Post-it noting tabbing all of them. And then I eventually write what is supposed to be like this one we saw for the book on symbolism. It's like, okay, for the color section, this is extremely relevant. Let me put this here. I think I even color coded the Post-it notes. And then I start to aggregate all that information onto separate pieces of paper. Maybe I'll print it out, type up my notes on it, print those out, and then start cutting those out. I do it all on the floor, not on the computer. A lot of stuff gets typed on the computer. Most of it gets printed out and put on the ground and organized like that. That is how I organize information. So if you're ever like, I just can't see how I could organize a book, that's a really great way to do it. You don't even need to print out all the writing. It might just be, the headers of the sections or whatever. It really helps to envision the final flow of the book when we do that. So I gathered it all and I eventually did all the writing for it. In the early months of 2020, I finished all the writing and then I sent all the writing off with all of the descriptions of the symbols and everything. So how this book flows, it starts with an intention and I discuss my experience with working with art, with working with mystical elements, with working with meditation, and how that's influenced my work, my personal work. And then we go into materials, we go into stitches, and then we go into the really fun part of the book, which is the treasury of symbols. So this is where the design for the book got really, really fun. So because of the way that we were laying them out, we knew that we wanted the entire page to be a single sheet of fabric. So to do that, we knew that we needed to stitch within certain elements and have the words fit within other areas. So basically I did all the writing and then I sent it off to my publisher and my art director, her name's Alethea Morrison. I think she's doing her own thing now. Amazing art director, amazing vision. She was my editor for my second book. But so she did all the layout for me so that I was able to then add the embroidery on top without having to worry about words overlapping stitches. So after I finished all the writing, I then started sketching in all of the designs. So for each element, for each symbol included in the treasury of symbols, I sketched them in each section that they were in, and I sketched them on these overall pages. I then sent the writing and the sketches to my art director, and then she went ahead and laid out my sketches with my writing so that I could trace these sketches onto a single sheet of fabric for each page of the book, and then go ahead and stitch that so that everything had the right spacing around it so that we knew all the text was going to fit correctly. And then I brought all of these sketches into Photoshop so I could color them up, so I could figure out what the colors would look like cohesively together on the page. This was a little bit more than I went a little bit above and beyond on this part, but also another tool that I like to use that I always talk about is the markup tool on the iPhone. So if you don't know Photoshop, you can always take out your iPhone and color something up with a markup tool. So that was how that got planned, which is apparently not a very common way of working with design. Usually the whole book gets written and illustrated and everything, and then all that gets put together. This got written and then designed and then illustrated, which is like a really interesting way of working. So while I was working on this book, I started dealing with some feelings of the who am I to's. And this is where sometimes it's really super helpful to get outside help on something like this. So I happened to thankfully fell into a trade with a Jungian psychoanalyst where she fell in love with one of my shirts. and said, I would love to buy this. And I was like, actually, I've heard about your work. She lived in our town, so I had heard about her. She was a local. I said, I've heard what you do, and I would love to trade a session or two with you for this shirt. So that was a really amazing experience in being able to talk that through about like the who am I to's. And it was really just like, who are you not to? Which is always the answer to that. This is not a book on brain surgery. This is a book on creativity. And if you have the ability to access creativity, you have the ability to tell other people about your own experience with it. So that was really helpful. And so as I started designing each page of the book, I kept asking myself, this was the quote, I think I quoted it in the beginning of the book somewhere. The quote that I kept referring to was one that said, to capture a bird feather by feather is barbaric. To capture its essence is divine. And that was what I kept channeling. It was like, people don't just need to know how to draw an eagle from real life. Other people, I actually am not good at drawing from real life. I'm really good at drawing from real life. I'm not good at stitching from real life. I'm not good at thread painting where it makes it look just like real life. It doesn't interest me, and I'm not good at it. Probably why it doesn't interest me. So I was like, they don't need me to replicate an eagle. What they need is to see the essence of an eagle translated in graphic design. So we can see some of the birds on this page. The swan, I think I stitched like 17 times. And the fun part about this book is anytime I needed to restitch something, I didn't get to just like use a different piece of fabric. These all needed to be on the same page. So if I was going to restitch the swan, I had to make sure that none of the previous stitches were showing up. I had to like really work within that. So just some fun details about it. But yeah, just trying to think of like, how can I combine the essence of this object with the literal imagery of it so we can see what the literal imagery is, and also use the stitches in an innovative way. So it was a really fun blend, every single page of doing that. And there were so many pages that I had to stitch more than one time. There are some pages that I stitched like 3 or 4 times. So yeah, for example, this page, this collage, this was the original. This was the first one I stitched up for it. And I was like, this just feels, it's not a bad embroidery. There's nothing wrong with it. I was like, it just doesn't belong in a book somewhere. So I redrew and I redrew and I redrew until I realized I was like, all these pieces need to feel more cohesive. And I think I set myself up for that one not fully working out in my vision, because the first one I did, the first bouquet, was so fun. Like this, I just love the way they all turned out. They all have their own energy, and they're kind of emerging from the same space. And this felt really solid and cohesive. This, however, I was like, this feels like a little bundle of chaos to me. It didn't feel like it was giving any of the images justice. And so I realized what I needed to do was make them feel like they blended more, make them feel like they belonged together a little more. And even though, for example, this peony leaf is very different than this poppy leaf, by having them in the same color, having them in the same motion, and doing them in the same stitch, I was able to create some cohesion there. So I learned so much about design through this process that I ended up opening up an online course called Magic Threads based on the art of embroidery design for magical intention because of this experience of design. So the course was created with the intention of guiding you to bring your ideas into the physical realm through the art of embroidery. So I took what I learned from being able to reduce each literal image into a symbol that I felt expressed its essence, that I learned from designing the frames for the chapter openers, what I learned from planning the talisman with intentions like protection or good fortune. And I turned all of this information and all of this inspiration into a lesson plan, which includes sketchbook practice as well as sampler practice. And I did this in much the same way I described planning the chapters for Mystical Stitches. So I printed everything out, I cut it up, I rearranged it on the floor until the sections started to feel cohesive. And most importantly, they started to feel transformational, because I wanted to be sure this course had a really strong impact on the people who took it. Not just that they learned how to stitch better, but that they learned these stitches in their bones to be used more like a visual language, so that they could learn to get all their ideas out on the page and not worry about whether they're good or not, so that they were able to use the sketchbook as a space of expression, not a space of perfection. So the course has now been split into 4 mini workshops just to make it easier to navigate. But the Magic Threads bundle, which is now what it is, been separated into, it comes with the Sketchbook for Stitchers workshop, which is, in my opinion, a sleeper hit. I think it's amazing. But that is only available through the Magic Thread bundle. And you can find the link for all of this below. I'm going to stop talking about it now. This is supposed to be about the book. This is supposed to be about the book. So I'm just going to kind of pull out some of the pages here. I have the whole book stitched up so you can see they're stitched together on pages first. So yeah, this one was a fun one. This is the frame for the botanicals page. And I finished this one, was like, okay, this is the energy that I need to really move forward with. And the elephant, for example, I was like, I do not need to give you a gray on gray, perfectly shaded elephant. That is not what my work does. So it was like, how do I capture the essence and the magic within the elephant and within the symbolism of the elephant? Anyways, if you want to look at all the pictures, you can look at the book, probably looking at it on a computer screen through video is not the best way to see it. After I was finished with all those stitches, I might as well, I took this box full of paper, or full of fabric, and just like giant stacks of fabric, and drove it to the publisher because it was, I think I finished the stitches in May of 2020, and anybody who may have put something in the mail in May of 2020 and never saw it again would understand why I took the 3-hour drive to my publisher instead of just sticking it in the mail. I was like, absolutely not. We are not losing 6 months worth of stitches. I'm sure I have so much more to say about this book, and I'm sure I will, but that's sort of just the basis of it. I think this video is getting too long, so I'm going to start cutting up here. But, and I just want to say there have been so many people who have reached out, who have commented, who have left reviews that have just really, I just never could have imagined the impact that this book had. And I'm just like so in awe every day and appreciative of those reviews and of those comments. It means the world to me, honestly. But I did want to share just because not everyone will always love what you do, and that's a good thing. It means you have a point of view. It means you have a perspective. So I want to share one of my favorite bad reviews, and this is not because I want to focus on the negative. I actually find humor in this review. It's just because a huge fear of mine that I had to get over was a bad review, was people not liking the book. And sometimes those fears can block us from doing anything, or it can block us from sharing the work we've made. So I wanted to sort of unpack that a little bit, because when you finally do actually get thrown shade, you're actually like, oh, that's not my person, or like they missed the point entirely and I don't really care. And there are still people that who are going to really love it. So the reviews, the title of the review was "Too Much New Age, Not Enough Crafting." And I'm just like, hey, thank you. Yeah. Hey, Jackie, you can buy literally any other book on embroidery, but thank you for totally ignoring the cover, the title, the subtitle, everything in this book that said, this is probably a new age book. And she said that you don't have to do a clear light meditation to embellish garments. And like, yes, thank you for pointing that out. You don't. That's correct. I don't think I ever said that it was a requirement. But if it's something you don't want to see, how the hell did you end up with this book in your hands? So anyways, the Mystical Stitches is still available for purchase wherever books are sold. Tell your library to grab a copy. It is now also it's published in Germany and Brazil, which is super awesome. So if you speak German or Portuguese, then you can get it in your language. And also one thing, I do not recommend buying the ebook. I looked at it the other day. I was like, oh, this is chaos. It is not designed to be read on a tablet or a computer or a whatever thing screen. It is designed to be held in your hand and stitched alongside. And yeah, thank you so much for tuning in. And I hope that you enjoyed this, and I will see you in a couple weeks with more on something. Head to mixedcolor.net for more. Oh, and I think this is the point where I'm supposed to ask you to like and subscribe, I guess. I don't know.